I think after I get that close, I think we're good. Okay, so this week's, yeah, we can wait on Crinkly. Okay, now that crinkling is over, so basically this week's code review is over the new deployment system, which I have to say is pretty awesome. Windows better stop doing these little alerts. So basically, what this kind of started from was I got a request from Darby for a decent deploy script. And he mentioned, something automated would be pretty cool. And we've kind of been talking about doing, some sort of like deploy server or something for a while. And I've kind of been putting a little bit of thought towards it here and there. And I was originally thinking about doing, something where we wouldn't really have to write deploy scripts, but instead this system would just kind of handle everything. And that idea was basically of a system that would be so complicated that no one would ever have time to write it. So I just decided to write something that was very simple so that we would have something that does this. And it basically just leaves everything up to the deploy scripts. Really all it does is it accepts the hook call from BitBucket and figures out which branch needs to be deployed, and then if there's a script for that branch, it runs that script. And that is literally all this is doing. I didn't really write it in Delta Zend or with any sort of framework or anything. I just kind of wrote pure PHP. And most of what I have so far is in the deploy.php. Does a few things. Start off with a lock file, which I really just wanted to avoid the situation where BitBucket, sends two hook requests fairly close together. So, for instance, if I know the food bank deploy script takes a little over a minute to run, and a lot of that is Composer. But it takes about a minute to run. So if we were to get a request from BitBucket and it starts running and 30 seconds later we get another request, then it would cause a bunch of problems because we would have two scripts trying to deploy to the same place at the same time. So I just created a simple little lock file, and if it's already locked, it'll just wait until it's unlocked to run. So that kind of creates sort of a queue.
So the lock is kind of global. Like, it's not just for each project. There's only one deploy that's going to happen at a time across all of our projects.
Right. And that's not really, something that's necessary. It was just I was trying to get something that would work.
Sure.
And
sure.
I didn't really want to spend a whole lot of time coding it in the first iteration. Eventually, I'm going to have a database hooked up to this, and I'll track a whole bunch of like how long did the deploy take and all that type of stuff, and that'll probably be what I do with locking in the future. but for right now, it's just a simple little lock file. I have a simple whitelist that just whitelists who can run the script to BitBucket and the Office. The payload is where they send over all of the information about the commit or commits. Because when you push code back up to the origin, a lot of times that can have more than one commit, and often does. So instead of sending you one request per commit, one right after the other, they just kind of lump them all together. So all of that is in the payload. That is JSON encoded. Yeah, I can look at any of these individual functions, but really for the most part, it's kind of obvious what they do.
One little
clone repo.
Sorry, one minor
What was
note.
that?
I feel like you might want an exit function or something like that, because like on line 25, I feel like you should be getting rid of your lock file there, right?
Line 25.
Like before you exit, you're not getting rid of the lock file, so
Oh yeah.
it'll just be blocking permanently if you ever get something without a payload.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah, I think right here I had it where it would unlink the lock file before it exits. I do actually have a cleanup function.
Oh right, yeah.
But it also like deletes any repository that has been cloned.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'll have to add in an unlink right there. Anyway, yeah.
One note, I put something in the chat. I'm not sure if you saw it yet, but you can also take a look at the flock function in PHP. Might be useful here too.
Flock?
That's right.
Okay, I'll check that out. Yeah, that sounds like it might be useful. Let's see. Okay, so here we basically just clone the repository. Any push is basically any push that you do to a Git repository is always going to be to a single repository. So here it clones the one repository based on the information that we get from BitBucket. And then it tries to find deploy scripts. One of the things that I ran into was the fact that when you are pushing, I think you could be pushing to multiple branches, and so for all of those, I wanted to be able to do multiple deploys if there are multiple branches, but of course not at the same time. So what it does is find deploy scripts. Let me actually grab that one. Oh, probably that one. I really need to clean up some of this code. I feel like everyone's talking in the chat now, and I actually have that open. Anyway. So find deploy scripts. It basically just goes through all of the commits, finds which branch each commit is in, and then looks through the repository. And I'm actually checking out each individual branch as I'm looking for a deploy script for that branch, which is something that I didn't initially think about, but yeah. So if the branch that the commit was on is the develop branch, then it'll find the develop branch here, and then it'll do git checkout develop and then it will look for the deploy develop script. And then if that exists, it will return a list of all of the scripts that it finds.
For that particular function, it might be more optimal to use the BitBucket API instead of doing the clone. I know Composer does that, so it can basically say, hey, BitBucket, is there a file with this name in this repository on this branch? And it'll return, basically file exists or not. And then you could clone the repo. But that way you're not cloning everything. If there's not a deploy script there, you won't have to clone that way. So you can avoid doing this.
That makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah, that would probably speed things up a lot. I didn't even think about that. Yes, and so then you have the actual deploy, which is probably in the file that I just closed. Yep, here we go. This is really simple, of course. It goes into the directory that the script is in. So in the root directory of the Git repository, and then it just runs the script. And if it returns 0, then it returns true. Otherwise, false, which I'm not even recording any of that right now, so none of that really matters all that much. But for right now, this is the entirety of the code. It's really simple. Just clones the repository, looks for the script. If the script for that branch exists, then it runs the script. Also,
how risky is it that we have those variables in the, I guess it's just the one branch variable in the exec call there? The script, are any of those variables unfiltered?
That's a good point.
Just something to think about.
Yeah, I probably need to be doing a little bit of something to make sure that that's nothing too crazy. I mean, I guess I've locked it down to where all of these requests are only going to be coming from either BitBucket or the Office. So it's not too much of a concern, but that does make sense. It's definitely something that I want to check for.
Yeah,
just in case.
A built-in escape shell arg function you can use. That'll take care of it for you.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Cool.
You guys are giving me a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah, sorry.
That's cool. Okay, so this is the actual deployment. This is the actual deployment system, and I wanted to look at a deploy script. This is probably something that you guys will be looking at a little bit more, maybe writing yourself, probably just pulling pieces from this script because this script is pretty awesome. I have it set to define a whole bunch of stuff at the top so that people can basically just copy the script and move it over to another project or for another environment on the same project or whatever. I've been actually checking for dependencies, which is fairly new deploy script-wise. Just requires expect, rsync, and SSH. Here's the interesting part. Expect, I don't know if too many of you guys are familiar with expect, but it's something that's very useful for interfacing with something that's not easily interfaced with. For example, if you're going to use, down here we have SSH, and if you're trying to SSH into just about anything, it's either going to ask you for a password or it's going to accept your key or something. In this instance, because it's going to be the server making all of these calls, keys aren't really an option. So we're going to have to do password, and you can't just pipe in an SSH password. It just doesn't work like that. It doesn't use stdin to read the passwords. So here we're kind of calling the SSH command. This is, I think we're running, Composer. And it spits out this long SSH command. And then on this line, we're saying expect password. And that is basically just waiting for the SSH command to output this string. So once it says that it's asking for the password, then we just send the password with a \r after it for the new line. And then we wait until the SSH command has finished running. And that's it. This is all the expect that you need to put in a password for SSH. I have a timeout set of 10 minutes. One of the things that I ran into was that if I didn't set a timeout, there was a possibility that the deploy system would just be locked forever because it would be just waiting for you to do something in one of these expect calls.
Hey, Mark.
So, yeah.
What about the update dependencies block where it's saying Composer install? Wouldn't that be Composer update on subsequent calls, or does that just automatically happen in Composer? I'm not that familiar with it.
I'm not really sure. I think install seemed to get it without outputting any errors. I didn't really look into that a whole lot.
My concern is that if you change your composer.json, the command you're supposed to run is composer update after that. So something to think about there.
Yeah, I'll look into that. One of the things that I did have to add was this option on SSH, the strict host key checking. I had to turn that off because anyone who's used SSH on command line knows that every time you connect to a new host that you don't have their key already saved, it'll ask you, do you want to accept that new key? And this just kind of bypasses that because whenever we have the deploy system running your script, it can't be it can't be anything interactive at all. So we just have to assume that any of the hosts that we're connecting to, we don't have to worry about their keys, which might be something that I could look into verifying later on, but we haven't ever run into that as an issue. Yeah, with this script you can set the user, the host, the port, all that type of stuff. And I just have a few different expect blocks. There are 4 of them, and these would be fairly easy for people to just copy and paste to other scripts. Basically, you just replace everything after spawn with the command that you want to run that requires a password. And that's about it. Does anyone have any questions?
So from the perspective of the previous script, we're always going to have a fresh clone of the repository by the time we get to this script, right?
Right.
Okay, so I think install is okay there, because you're always going to be working off the fresh clone, so that should be fine. And then also from the perspective of your other script, I can write this portion of it in anything I want, basically, right? So I could like do something more complicated than this shell script if I wanted to, and you don't
Right.
really care.
Yeah. I mean, it could even be PHP as long as you add the line at the top
Cool.
for user bin PHP. It could be whatever you want it to that our standard Delta system server can run. Um, yeah, I think that this system moving forward is going to be um, really useful in a lot of our applications because you'll basically be able to just, if we're using Git flow, you could push something to the develop branch and then it will automatically rebuild the staging site based on the script, and we could eventually start using the same thing for deployments to a live system, so that it's not people fumbling around trying to figure out uh, what to do, trying to figure out how it does, and we just have a script that automatically handles everything and then logs exactly how long it took, the text of the output. I'm eventually going to have it logging a whole bunch of stuff for every single deploy that it does, and then there will be something at deploy.deltasys.com that kind of tells you, okay, here are the deploys that it did today, here's how long each one took, and the text output, the return value, all of that type of stuff.
Cool.
But I think it works really well with Git flow because we have a bunch of different branches, and especially the develop branch and the master branch.
And what was the limitation that was making keys be an unsuitable tool in this situation?
I basically just I don't want to have to set up a whole bunch of keys on the hosting side of things, and manage those keys inside the repos. And I mean, if you really wanted to, you could use keys if you wanted to do it that way, but um, I think using expect to just put in the password is a little bit easier.
Okay.
I think everyone's having a little too much fun in the chat, especially Jared. Okay, any more questions?
I don't think so. It's very nice. The PHP part that you wrote is pretty much a deployinator alternative. It's kind of cool.
I'm not sure that I've heard of Deployinator, but that's a pretty awesome name.
It's the project from Etsy that it's their centralized deployment server. And
Okay.
I was always interested in using it, but it's very much designed for a company that has a single big project. We are not, so
Right.
it's nicer for us.
Yeah. I'm hoping to build on this a little bit more, and obviously the deployment system right now, the code is just kind of cheaply cobbled together, but hoping to build on that.
And I'm assuming all of this is in a Git repo somewhere, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about it earlier today, and I thought that it was kind of weird that I just wrote this deploy system, but it is not itself being deployed by this deploy system. So I feel like I need to fix that.
Yeah. I only have a single layer of conception so far.
Yeah. Cool stuff.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
See you guys later.
That was very good. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark.